Alright guys, I made 2 thumbnails for this one. One was a little clickbaity, and the other one was way more informative, but less clickbaity. So tell me which one you got, and how you feel about each one of these. Anyway, hello nuts and nerds, and welcome back to a Squirrel Plays. Today we're going to be talking about TTRPGs for beginners. And why? Well, despite my view count, I do get a wide variety of people, and I've kind of neglected the newbies to the hobby. Not because I didn't have time for them or didn't think they were worth it, but because I've been calling myself a newbie for a while now, and I really hate getting on here and speaking like I have some kind of authority. But at this point, I do at least have some years under my belt, plus my position as a wannabe YouTuber has allowed me to collab with lots of other game designers and GMs, meaning I've got to play a lot of games in a short amount of time. And in that time, I've seen some things that I really wish I could have started out with. Now, as usual, we're going to do things the squirrel way and not the typical YouTube way because I have a losing streak to keep up. Instead of giving you the top 5 TTRPGs for beginners, I'm going to recommend a few depending on what you want out of a game. So if you are new or you already know what you're doing but have friends that want to get into the hobby, let me ask you this. What do you want out of a TTRPG? Do you want to fiddle with a bunch of numbers and math and roll an excessive number of dice? Or do you want to do those things to a minimal degree while focusing more on hanging out, drinking beer, making jokes, and telling stories? And I know the metric a bunch of numbers isn't exactly something you can define because a bunch means something very different to me than it does to you. Heck, new people don't even know how to define a bunch of numbers to themselves yet. So I'm going to break this video up into 2 parts. Part 1 is going to be for those who think they're interested in things like tracking stats, doing some math, having lists of skills and abilities, while generally having a slower paced game due to more rules crunch. And part 2 will be about games that are what we call rules light or less crunchy. These typically not only have more wiggle room for creativity and improv, but frequently require it. And that can cause problems on its own, believe it or not, and because of that, I do highly recommend that you watch both parts. All right, let's go! All right, so you're looking to get into something crunchy. Maybe something like Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition because that's what everyone else plays and you want to join your friends. And if any of you in the comments are about to say D&D isn't crunchy, just hold your horses, all right? I know you love the game, but it fits the bill for crunch. Every game involves somebody asking how something works and inevitably looking something up. Plus, every single time that I've heard somebody say it's easy, it's always been followed up with compared to, which honestly just makes me think of this little bit.
If it had like ham in it, it's closer.
No.
It's closer to a British carbonara.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
If my grandmother had wheels, she would have been a bike.
So anyway, my first recommendation to you would be Adventurous because it was designed specifically for the purpose of introducing people to these types of TTRPGs. It takes the concepts of more complicated games and breaks them down into something more manageable. Instead of rolling dice to see if you hit something, then rolling more dice to see how much damage you do, then adding modifiers from various different sources, you just roll a handful of d6s based off your related stats. Your result is either a miss, a weak success, or a strong success. The damage is a static amount based off your weapon type, and this process works the same for spells. Your weapon choice and stat distribution absolutely make a difference, but it's greatly simplified, and that goes for a lot of things in the game, like armor and damage reduction. But a couple other things Adventurous has going for it is that it speedruns the leveling up process to give you an idea of how that feels, even in a one-shot. As you get crits or completely fail rolls, you will gradually accrue experience points. And as you can see by this table here, gaining levels happens pretty quickly. And the other beautiful thing is that it's beginner friendly for the GM too. There's plenty of baddies in the back of the book for you to use, and it's incredibly simple. You got their HP, their armor, a list of equipment and abilities, and at the bottom, actions you can roll for so you don't even have to make a decision on what they do. It's very plug and play in that regard, which I feel like can be really handy for people brand new to running a game. It takes a lot off their plate so they can focus on the other things they have to improv and deal with. Now, what if you still want some basic stats and weapon damage to fiddle with, but want something deadlier? You already know where this one's going. Mausritter. That's right. Though I will say, the one thing that might throw new people is that this is what they call a roll under system. That means you want your dice to roll low. So if you were doing some kind of strength check and your strength has a value of, let's say, 12, you'd want to roll under that number. It can throw you for a little bit of a curve because when you're rolling for damage, you still want to roll high. Now, while Mausritter does have traditional things like stats, varying weapon damage, and inventory to track, and conditions to deal with, both of which I mentioned in this video, by the way, because it's just that good of a game, it is very simple to pick up. So much so that the entire manual is only 48 pages, and that includes a lot of extra information that you definitely will not use for your first couple of games, as well as an adventure for you to run. But because it is simple, that does mean it requires some creativity and improv on the GM's part to keep things interesting and running smoothly, which could be difficult for some people, and we'll get into that a bit more later. But as a quick example, you can compare enemies from the two games. Adventurous has the fully defined plug-and-play system, whereas Mausritter gives you just the necessities. I will also point out that both of these books have fantastic little nuggets in them about running fun and engaging games that can be applied no matter what system you're using. And if you're wondering where you go from here, I think my next recommendation for you would probably be Ironbound or Plaguebound when it drops if you'd rather pure fantasy. And if you can stomach this setting, I would also say Hellborn Descendant. Two very different styles of play, but I think they're on pretty equal grounds for complexity and would make great stepping stones into even more complex games if that's what you're wanting to get into. Okay, so maybe stats and various weapon damage output and number crunching isn't quite your jam, but you still like the idea of rolling dice and having a good time. Where do you go? That would be what we call the rules light territory. Squirrel territory, in other words. And for those of you who are familiar with the channel, probably think I'm about to recommend tricubetales, don't you? Well, guess what? I'm going to recommend that you like and subscribe. I'm only half recommending Tricube because this space is shared with EZD6. While these both are rules light systems, they have some key differences between them that I believe would greatly affect different brain types. See, while Tricube is incredibly simple and has very few rules, it relies on the person running the game to make a lot of stuff up on the fly. For some people, that's great. That's what they prefer. They love that flexibility and improv. For others, that can throw a bit of wrench in things and mess them up. Having to determine the difficulty of everything on the fly puts more weight on the GM. And you know what? I've seen experienced GMs struggle with that simply because that's not how their brain works. They like things written down ahead of time or fully defined. This monster has a difficulty of 5, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Whereas other GMs flourish in that environment. The players are in a similar boat with Tricube due to the simplicity of the system. You pick one of 3 archetypes, then completely make up your own perk and quirk. These things determine how many dice you get to roll, which means during your play, you will have to figure out and justify when and why you're getting those bonuses. Again, for some people, that just does not click. And for others, it's the best thing in the world. Despite what some people on the internet may tell you, one style is not better than the other. It's whichever one you prefer. Which brings us to EZD6, a game that is also rules light and has a lot of wiggle room for improv and creativity, but also brings with it a very stable structure. For example, here you can see a couple of monsters from the book that you can just grab and use. One of these is a very easy monster, and the other one he's a little difficult. You have the number of hits it can take, as well as what you need to roll in order to land a hit. No making things up on the fly, it's right there for you to use. Then there's some bullet points to let you know what tools the monster has at its disposal. I got it. Instead of the different types of attacks like Adventurous had with the different amounts of damage that could be done, we just see things like hits once, or in the big guy's case, hits 4 times. There's a couple other details, but it is something you can grab and just drop right into your game, meaning less work for the GM. The GM doesn't have to determine how hard that enemy is to hit, and the players don't have to determine how many dice they get to roll based off some vague perks because their abilities are written in stone. They know how many dice they get to roll each and every single time. But see, here's the flip side to that. When things are written in stone like that, it means there's more for you to remember. Players have to remember what advantages, boons, abilities, and inclinations they have, as does the GM for their monsters, on top of keeping up with the other players. Whereas in Tricube, all you have to do is remember your archetype along with a single perk and quirk. Then you get to determine, while playing, whether or not it actually works. Both are very good, fantastic games, but both very different approaches that will be received very differently. How many times can I say very in one sentence? I'm a writer, baby. If you want really solid structure that you can lean on when in doubt, but still have plenty of room to be creative when you want to try, then EasyD6 is a fantastic way to go. If you want an incredible amount of freedom and very loose rules that depend on players and GMs to make things work in a way that benefits everyone, then tricubetales is a fantastic way to go. It just depends on what you're looking for and what you want to get into. And look, absolutely nothing in the world says you can't play both of them. I've played them both multiple times because they're great. EasyD6 is more deadly than Tricube 2 for both the players and the monsters. Because of how the critical hits work in that game, you can completely obliterate a fairly difficult monster in one go. On the other hand, the monster can do it to you too. Whereas with Tricube, it's a bit more player-friendly in that regard. You typically have some better odds at success, but you also have some really neat ways of healing yourself and keeping yourself afloat. Either way, though, I think both of these gems are a fantastic way to introduce new players to the hobby, even if they wanted to get into crunchier games later. Alright, ladies and gents, that's it. I feel like this one was kind of a weird one and out of nowhere because we really didn't talk about anything storytelling related, but I thought it'd be helpful for the new sprouts out there looking to get into the hobby. And since I've been super blessed and fortunate enough to get to experience all of these crazy games, I figured it made sense to share. Now, shout out time. This week's shout out goes to some random dude named Ross. There was this online event recently called Crit, and it was a ton of games scheduled throughout the entire week. Dave from Grimwood Games ran into a little bit of a snafu where all but one player ended up not showing up for a game of Ironbound. Old Ross here was really wanting to try the system out, so Dave called in an emergency request, and me and Glee came to save the day. And Dave repaid my kindness by killing me in the game. Twice, but that's not important. What is important is that it turns out Ross is actually a viewer of the channel. So Ross, I hope you had a good time, and I apologize for Glee's behavior with the bartender.